I'm Jami, Amerine, author, speaker, artist, wife, mom, and friend. This week's episode, New Year, New Everything. Today's episode is brought to you by independent beauty consultant Jennifer Willerton, the only person I trust with my face. So much to tell you today. Let's get this thing started. Hi, I'm Jami, Amerine, author and blogger at Sacred Ground Sticky Floors. I hope you had a beautiful holiday season. I personally was glad to see 2018 go, but at the same time, I'm grateful for all I learned in the last year. I will start by saying it was the hardest year of my life, and no one died. We are safe and well. However, I was struck hard with the grief of loss from the year before, change, and a lot of disappointment. I think I am most fascinated by how quickly we want that part to be over. But for listeners who are also watchers of HGTV, what has to happen in the restoration shows like Fixer Upper? What's the first thing that they do after they buy the house? Demolition. The complete teardown and rebuild has to happen before the big reveal. That process is important, and I don't want to forget it. Stripped down to the studs, we see all the potential for new beginnings, and that is where I'm at in my journey. I confess, because it's what I do best, this podcast, which I love to do, has been a red-hot mess. Like so many other aspects of my life, I have had to take a long, hard look at how to fix it up. I thought, because I had been asked to, that I would just read my blog post. But again, I confess, that was just seriously no fun. I didn't enjoy it at all. And also, I don't read well out loud. I have to tell you this, but so I was frustrated, and I didn't want to be frustrated because I love podcasting so very much. So Christmas rolled around, and the good news was that the fog was kind of lifting on my depression. And then all of a sudden, I started having ideas for blog posts and book ideas, and they had just started flowing again, but not the podcast. It just left me stumped. And I have this notebook full of ideas, but when I said them out loud, it all just seemed kind of flat. And so I decided that I would add that to my prayer journal, what to do with the podcast. And then I hit rock bottom again. I think one of the most important things to remember about depression and grief is that it isn't resolved by the marking of a new year. It was Wednesday, January 3rd, and I wouldn't actually know that until later on that day when I checked, but I slept later than I usually do, and my phone was dead, so I wasn't sure what time it was. And I was tinkering with a piece of jewelry I had been crafting for my Etsy shop, and the vandals kept bugging me for food. So I didn't even put my bra on. I just threw on my raincoat because it was pouring rain here for a week, in my pajamas and my galoshes, and I stormed out of the house to go and get them some donuts. To my shock, the donut place was closed. So I was just slamming on the radio button on my car because I thought it was referencing an AM station, but it wasn't. It wasn't 12:30 AM radio, but 12:30 PM in the afternoon. And for whatever reason, this was my last straw, and I fell apart. I have just so not felt myself. I'm all about big breakfasts and loving on my children well, but this meltdown had so much to do with everything else in my life: writing, podcasting, my small art business, and especially foster care. So I want to interject here. We are not going to renew our foster license, and I am truly sad about this. But the loss of our long-term placement, Joy Baby, even though it was a blessing, has just been too much for our family to really face going through again. Furthermore, since Joy Baby left, God has been giving me glimpses of where foster care reform could be such a huge blessing to so many people. And so Justin and I started our Etsy shop with the hope of raising enough funds to eventually have a nonprofit program for families like ours who need community and support after the removal of a long-term placement, legal funds for foster families because those aren't offered by the state, and greater still, a Jesus Love program for parents of removed children. Again, I want to interject, the program would not be for sexual predators or extreme violent offenses. But while we were in the foster care system, I met with a lot of broken mamas. Joy Baby's mama was and is a great mom. She fell on hard times and she met with a harsh addiction. And I'm stunned by what she has been able to overcome. And I believe my family's relationship with her, our love for her, and the grace she was afforded by us, even with as much as we wanted to raise Joy Baby ourselves, was an important part of her recovery and reunification with her daughter. It's a long shot, guys, but there are people that work in prison ministries with hardened criminals that offer more grace to rapists and murderers than we offer to parents who are alone, made a mistake, or have been falsely accused. And I believe Jesus' love is the solution to restoring these families and breaking the cycle. Again, in my experience with family services, I saw some of the most brutal treatment of human beings who were in the most terrifying situation I can fathom. Someone, most likely someone that they do not know, has their child. Just for a moment, I want you to try and imagine all the emotions that would be associated with this. But on this morning, in the parking lot of a closed donut shop, those ideas, my writing career, and a wealth of other struggles and failures seemed as impossible as getting fresh donuts that late in the day. So this was my prayer. Jesus, I need a sign. I don't want to test you. I promise I know you don't owe me anything, but all of this seems impossible. I feel lost, and the climb seems dreadful. I didn't ask for any of this. You literally handed me a 2-book deal and all of these things, and now I feel completely abandoned. If any of this matters, if I'm supposed to trudge on, I need to know someone has heard me. Someone remembers how much I want Jesus' love for everyone, how dearly I loved, how much we have lost, and that it matters. Will you please let me know if I'm supposed to keep going forward? Please. I came home and I cried all day and I waited for some kind of remarkable sign. And then, right before bed, I got a message from a fellow blogger, Shelby Spear, who I will link in the show notes. And she messaged me and said that I needed to listen to Jen Hatmaker's podcast with Susan Ramirez, which I will also link in the show notes. They were talking about foster care. I was listening to it and they were talking about foster care and I'm crying and just wondering what's going to happen. And then Jen said, it wasn't very long ago that we had Jami Amerine on here talking about parenting and foster care. And she remembered. I've only talked to Jen Hatmaker like a couple of times, and I really struggled with this act, but I decided to text her, and I told her about the donuts and the struggles, and I thanked her for remembering. She answered with grace and encouragement, and then we had a volley of LOLs. He answered my prayer. And so, like I said I would, I trudge on. I don't know what he has in mind, but I know he answered me. So I put up a blog post, I made some bracelets, and I sold my first painting, which is a whole different mixed bag of emotions that I'm not ready to talk about. But I was still not sure of what to do with this podcast. So then Friday morning, in the midst of preparing for a party I was hosting for my teenage daughter's drama team, one of my dearest friends, Rebecca of That Organic Mom, and yes, I'll link her too, asked if I'd call her. We hadn't talked in a while, which is not that odd because we both have 1,000 kids and commitments and just tons of stuff going on. But Rebecca and I started the Hope Lively community on Facebook, another link I will add. But that's just the icing. We just have a real kinship. She's just a beautiful human and a good friend, and she loves Jesus and grace, and we always just feed off of each other in every single conversation. So Rebecca has a podcast called The Healthy Bite, and she's just a fantastic writer. She does her research. She's just really good. But interestingly enough, she had just come across a scripture that morning that is one of the main themes of my book proposal, which is all about living free and healthy, not because of your circumstances, but because of Jesus. The scripture, a joyful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones, from Psalm 17:22, had just left Rebecca on that morning completely undone. So we ended up talking for a while, and we both cried and lamented some things and revealed some things to each other that we'd been dealing with that we hadn't talked about. And we reveled in the truth of this simple scripture. A joyful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. Anyway, Rebecca had pretty recently stopped doing her podcast, and she knew I was struggling with mine. So we started talking and thinking that we could revamp the 2 podcasts and do it together and talk about all the things, assuming we can keep from laughing, crying, and all the other things that happen when Rebecca and I start talking. I want to say I do not take lightly prayers or petitions in donut shop parking lots. But y'all, I believe he answered me. So you don't have to do anything, but next week this podcast is getting a new name and a new look and a precious new co-host, Rebecca Huff of That Organic Mom. I am delighted to tell you, in this location with the same subscribers and nearly 2,000 downloads in just a few short months, Sacred Ground Sticky Floors podcast will become the Jubilee Road, a grace ride with Jami, Amerine, and Rebecca Huff. We bounced a lot of ideas off of each other for names, but when it came down to it, Jubilee Road was what we both felt like made a lot of sense, and I'll tell you why. 2018 is a great metaphor for a windy, bumpy road, but I was never alone on the ride, and neither was Rebecca. I am reminded of a road in Utah between Price and Spanish Fork called Route 6. And when I was about 5, we moved away from all of our family for my dad's job south of Utah to Farmington, New Mexico. But when we would return for the holidays and vacation, this is the route we would take back home, the U.S. Route 6, which actually was named the most dangerous and deadly road in Utah in 2014 with over 80 fatalities, according to KLS.com. With its twists and turns and just unbelievably terrifying and sharp drops off the road that I will never forget, it's a very, very long and winding road. And this was treacherous for me for one main reason, which is I have a tendency to get pretty fiercely carsick. My father and I, neither one will ever forget a vomiting incident that involved a giant Hershey bar I refused to share with my siblings, and the fact that he was very wrong and I was about to be very, very sick, which I proved to him by vomiting down his neck and back. But I have other memories of that road as well. The anticipation of my Grandma Mickey stepping on the porch, rubbing her hands together in delight, just absolutely desperate to love on us. That's what I always saw when she did that. She would rub her hands together really fast as we were getting out of the car, and it was like this desperate need to hold us close. I'd have visions of all the fun I would have with my cousins, playing in the cool Utah mountain air, movie night, ice cream cones or hot cocoa, or sledding or water slide parks, depending on the season. And oh my goodness, the view. The mountains exploded from their depths into the clouds, and they were just mysterious and beautiful, and they seemed to have no end. Although, in many ways, I dreaded the nauseating drive on U.S. Route 6. In many other ways, I knew it would pass, and I focused on the enormity, the colors, the textures, and the majesty of the drive when I wasn't spinning, but that's another story. And this is why I love Jubilee Road, and it so impacted me as an option for the name for the podcast. I left the idea with Rebecca, and she loved it too. And I wanted to say this out loud. It's kind of took me a while to even be able to record this because it's not easy for me to say, but I've been thinking about Joy Baby a lot, and I miss her a lot. I remember her hands and her sweet smell and her sass. She came into our care when she was 3 months old, and she left right before her 2nd birthday. She was wholly my daughter, but I do not get to raise her. I haven't seen or held her in 15 months and 26 days. I have not tucked her in, held her tight, or watched her chase and play with Sam and Charlie. And that loss, while unbelievable, was worth the ride. I would not trade the time she was with us for anything. It was a season of jubilee. Her absence, while laced with triumph, has been devastating. I used to say I could never do it, but I did. And I am still here. The past, the grief of saying goodbye, missing her, and wanting her has been debilitating. But at the same time, I am still here, and God will use that grief to create something new. And I am very excited that new thing includes my friend Rebecca. Rebecca actually met Sweet Joy Baby. She is most familiar with my hurt, and I am most familiar with Rebecca's. We will make a great team. Together, we want to discuss the things that leave us mystified, inspired, and raw. From health and wellness to family, marriage, and Jesus, we are all on a very wild, wild ride. I am most hopeful you will jump in the back seat of what I imagine would be a really cool pink, retro stylish convertible and have a good chat. We want to hear from you. We want to know if you have questions or hurts. And when I say that we want to that, I say it because we really do. And saying these things out loud to Jesus and that's the thing, friend, is it makes a difference. It makes a difference to say it out loud. So I want to really encourage you. Talk out loud to Jesus. I believe him. I believe he showed up. I believe that he died so that we could come to him with everything without sacrificing a lamb or covering our heads. The veil was torn so that he would no longer be separated from him by ritual or good or bad behaviors. Grace is the greatest gift and mystery. It is the only thing we have to commit to. You cannot be separated from him. You needn't start over because the calendar says you have to. He knows you. He died for you. He's available to you. I cannot wait to talk about this gift every week with you and Rebecca. So my prayer for you in 2019 is the total freedom that was bought for you on that cross. Grace upon grace. I pray you meet with him in a whole new way this year. I pray your eyes are opened and the scales are further and further removed to the gravity of this love and sacrifice. It's just grace upon grace. And most of all, I pray that Jesus be all over you, that you are drenched, soaked to your bones with this love that this amazing God has for you. No contingencies. Nothing stands between you and this adoring Father. Our scripture this week is, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert," which is from Isaiah 43:19. This has been season 2, episode 4. I want to say 4, so if it's not 4, you can just ignore me, but of Sacred Ground Sticky Floors podcast. Next week, if you're a subscriber, I believe you will get a notice for Jubilee Road, a grace ride with Jami, Amerine, and Rebecca Huff, season 3, episode 1. You can join me in praying for a flawless transition, as I am not very tech savvy, as you might know. We will be talking about the scripture, Psalm 17:22. A joyful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up the bones. And how even the best intentions for physical and mental wellness are void without a joyful heart. And we both propose, even in our darkest seasons, joy is the hope that moves us forward. I think you're going to really enjoy this. I know I'm going to. In the meantime, do me a favor and rate and review this podcast on iTunes. It helps other people find it. I was just reminded of this early in my publishing career after my friend Katie M. Reed, who, of course, I'll link in the show notes. Oh my gosh, I have a lot of people to link in the show notes. She was reading Stolen Jesus, and she ended up having a dream about me. And I was walking down this hall of a prison, like a wet, like kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean looking prison. And I was unlocking prison doors with this old key, and women were running out. And I remember thinking at the time, well, that's kind of lofty. But this is now my dream. Setting captives free. And yes, that includes even myself. But I am looking forward to it. I think it's going to be really cool, and I appreciate all of you, and hope you'll hang around. This episode was brought to you by independent beauty consultant Jennifer Willerton. Her link is also in the show notes. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be linking stuff right and left. But until next time, friend, thank you for listening. I guess you'll hear me next week, or I'll see you next week. In the meantime, Jesus be all over you.